American Legends, Episode 1, Paul Bunyan. Paul Bunyan is a legendary American. And by legendary, I mean he isn't real. He is fake. He was made up. Somebody probably created Paul Bunyan while taking a nice warm shower. The warm water of a shower is very relaxing. Showering can give you good ideas. Anyway, Paul Bunyan was very big. You know Dwayne the Rock Johnson? Tiny. Andre the Giant? Pshh, Miniscule. Hafþór Júlíus Björnsson, also known as the Mountain? Small. No, Paul Bunyan was really big. Bigger than any man alive. Even as a baby, he was big. Most babies are delivered by a stork to their mother. But Paul Bunyan was so large that it took 5 storks. Those poor birds must have been sweating and exhausted when they carried him. When Paul became an adult, he became a lumberjack. A lumberjack is a guy who cuts down trees with an axe. Well, nowadays they use a chainsaw. But back then, all they had were axes. When lumberjacks cut down a tree, they yell, "Timber!" That way the tree won't fall on someone. But Paul was lonely. He didn't have any good friends. He wanted a friend. One winter, blue snow began to fall. Usually snow is white. But this snow was strange. It was blue. After 4 days, Paul Bunyan walked through the snow. He came upon a giant snow mound. That is a big pile of snow, all blue. A tail was sticking out of the snow. Something said moo. Paul grabbed the tail and pulled. Out came a baby ox. The ox was all blue. Maybe because of the cold. Maybe because of the blue snow. Or maybe because it was hard to breathe in the snow. An ox is like a cow, only it is a boy. Sometimes they are called bulls. Oxes are used for working, such as pulling trees that a lumberjack cuts down. The ox was shivering because it was so cold. His whole body was shaking. Paul Bunyan brought the ox home. Paul made a big fire in his fireplace. The ox warmed up in Paul's cabin. He stopped shivering, but his fur stayed blue. He did not become brown or black or white, just blue. The ox was young. The ox was not old. So Paul said, "I will call you Babe." So Paul had named the ox Babe. All that winter, Paul and Babe walked around the cabin. The cabin was in Minnesota. Everywhere Babe stepped, he left a hole in the ground. When the blue snow melted, it filled the holes. That is why there are 10,000 lakes in Minnesota. In spring, Paul Bunyan and Babe went to Michigan. The winter was over and Paul was looking for a job as a lumberjack. Michigan has a lot of trees, but it did not have any watering holes big enough for Babe. Babe couldn't drink. All the lakes were like tiny puddles to Babe, so Babe was very thirsty. Paul knew what he had to do. He used his axe like a shovel and made a few small holes for Babe. You might know these holes. They are called the Great Lakes: Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. Why were the lakes so big? Well, remember that Paul was very big, ridiculously big, just enormous, and Babe was even bigger. After cutting all the trees in Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and all the rest of the middle of the United States, Babe, the blue ox, and Paul Bunyan went to look for more work. Paul was tired. He had worked very hard. He dragged his axe behind him. The axe made a huge hole in the ground. You might have heard of it. It is called the Grand Canyon. Eventually, they went to Alaska. This state is very far north and west. There are many trees there. And it is a very big state. Big enough for even Paul and his ox. Legend says he still lives there. If you go to Alaska and listen, you might still hear Paul yelling, "Timber!"